I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Genesis G80, the second generation G80, continuing the lineage of the car that was once known as the Hyundai Genesis when it launched in Australia back in 2014, became the Genesis G80 in a significant rebrand, but this is it, isn't it? This is the first G80 under Genesis as a standalone brand of its own. You know, it feels fresh. It's on a brand new platform, brand new engines, brand new exterior and interior, new design language. As far as generational changes go, this is more revolutionary than evolutionary. And that's hopefully what I'm able to communicate in today's video as we work our way around the G80. This is a pretty interesting car. Not only is it a big stately sedan outside, kind of in the mold of some European rivals like the 5 Series and the A6 and the E-Class, but it's also kind of spiritually similar to big cars that we used to make in this country, like the Holden Statesman and Caprice. And as we'll find out when we take it for a drive, there's a sort of plush opulence to it that suits Australian country road driving too. But first of all, we'll have a look at the interior, which is quite a lush place. We'll check out the back seat and the boot, and then yeah, we will take it out for a drive on the road. But before we do that, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. Here inside the new Genesis G80, the interior is, if anything, even more striking than the new exterior design, because this is really kind of a leather-lined paradise in the G80. In rival cars like the BMW 5 Series and the Audi A6, you have to pay more to get a leather-lined dash and leather-lined doors, and that to me just feels a little nickel-diming in cars that are supposed to be luxurious, whereas the G80 arrives with just a fuller package of opulent materials right out of the box. That being said, there is an additional $13,000 luxury package that a lot of people will want to consider because quite a few desirable options have been bundled up in it, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. One thing you also get as standard is a really good choice of colors in this interior, more choice than you get in most of the German cars of this price. You can go for all black if you want to, but like this car with its deep caramel tan interior color, you can also go for some more interesting choices too. And Genesis have basically paired a open pore wood choice to each of the interior colors to really match the leather and give it a relaxing kind of appearance, so that when you're driving along, your eye isn't kind of being caught out by bright colors or shiny materials or even too much piano black, which is basically relegated only to this capacitive touch dual zone climate control up here, which, you know, there's not too much space to pick up fingerprints because that's all there is in terms of piano black. The rest of it is soft leather, which soaks up light, soft wood, which soaks up light. So that makes it good in a country like Australia, which has such bright sun as you're driving down a country road. Now, this steering wheel, it's obviously quite a statement piece, quite sort of modernist in design, rugby ball appearance to this hub here. That's not going to be for everybody. Personally, I like it, and the rim isn't too thick. So with the 5 Series, the M Sport steering wheel is so thick, like people can barely get their hands around it. Here, it's a little more dainty, nice to hold. We do have wheel-mounted paddle shifters for the 8-speed torque converter auto that's controlled by this tempered glass shifter down here, which is quite a nice piece. Beyond that, we have a little trackpad and jog dial here, which gives you this sort of passive control of the 14.5-inch screen on the dash that is standard fit. So it is a touchscreen, but it's kind of hard to reach out and touch it because of where it's positioned. So this jog wheel down here is an inspired choice. And seeing Audi kind of ditch their MMI rotary controller, Genesis are picking it up. Personally, I think Genesis are on the right track. These things won't go out of style. They are a good way to control infotainment. Now, if you go for the luxury package I was talking about, you get a fully digital instrument cluster. As standard, it's only partially digital, which feels maybe a little underdone at this price point. But the digital version's cool. It has 3D and it tracks your eye. So it puts your trip computer and your safety features just closer to you, physically closer. So, you know, you feel kind of like the important information is being prioritized, but it is subtle. It doesn't make you feel sick. It's cool. You also upgrade to Nappa leather if you go for the luxury package. You get things like heating and ventilation in the rear seats. You get this suede headliner. You also get a couple of other safety radars as well, which is unusual, but that is all bundled up into one package. So for me, it's probably worth going for. Notably, compared to the last G80. There's no more Hyundai components used in this interior, which was something a lot of people didn't like. So all of this switchgear, all these knurled pieces are all unique to Genesis. So you get into this car and you don't feel like you're in something budget. It does feel properly luxurious, which is important in a segment like this. As for practicality, it's certainly not bad. We have this armrest between the seats, which is flock lined and quite deep, medium-sized cup holders, wireless phone charging with a cooling fan, 2 USB ports here. Mind you, the door bins are a little slim. You'll only get a 600 milliliter bottle in there, but hardly the end of the world. So up front, quite a comfortable vehicle to spend time in. Let's check out the commodious rear seat next. Here in the back seat of the Genesis G80, there's plenty of space on offer. Notably, quite a bit more space than the GV80 SUV has in the second row. Mind you, that car does give you the flexibility of a third row of seating too, but the G80 easily has more leg room. I'm 6 foot, headroom is just okay. This car's roofline isn't too coupe-esque, but you can see if you were much taller than me, you might struggle a little bit. But legroom is where it counts, and there's heaps of it. Tow room's also pretty good, so there is space to really relax in the back of the G80. And you'll do that by way of this kind of command center that comes down here in the center armrest, a very substantial piece. Leather lined on top, open pore wood here, but we have controls for the seats for starters, so we can move the seat. It moves the base forward, which gives the rear a little bit of room to kind of recline. The front seat certainly isn't going to be getting out of my way, but you know, it does make it a little bit more comfortable. If you go for the luxury package, you get this stuff along with heating and ventilation for the outboard seats in the rear as well. You could spend a little more money and get the rear seat entertainment package too. So if you're going to be using this car as a hire car, or if it's a company car to, you know, have executives in the back of, this is probably money well spent. Really nice graphics, super crisp. The operating system itself is actually quite pleasant, unlike most inbuilt rear entertainment units, which feel like something that costs $20 off Amazon. So here we have access to the map, we have entertainment options, we have audio input and stuff like that. So it is kind of your own little world back here in the back of the G80, which is pretty cool. We have a bit of storage here between the seats, another USB port, headphone jacks as I mentioned. Climate controls in the back are maybe a touch more limited than you might expect because we only have one zone for the rear seats. You can't have quad zone climate in this car, but that is real nitpicking. Even more nitpicking would be texturally, this vehicle sports really good materials, but this looks like leather up here on the grab handle. It's just plastic. And unlike in the GV80, you have to do the side blinds manually in the G80. So hopefully you can recover from that experience because in every other way, this is a very luxurious and opulent car to be driven around in. Here around the back of the G80, it's a pretty striking design, isn't it? And you don't have to go for this matte white paint in order to get that effect. Certainly, this is an interesting color, and if you can garage the car and keep it clean, then it's something I would consider. But there is an extensive range of quite deep metallic and other premium paints that you can get for the G80 as well. Now, some other changes. Obviously, this is quite a different design language to the outgoing first-gen G80, and that's all for the better. It's quite low, wide, quite sultry sort of styling. We've got these new quad lights from every angle of the G80 that look really good, sort of spaced out badging here as well. And this chrome strip that basically runs the entire length of the boot deck there, just to give it a little bit of extra garnish. Now, we've got a hidden button for the power tailgate that opens up nice and smartly. And you know, it's a traditional sedan boot. So the aperture is narrower than you'll get on a wagon or an SUV, but it goes back reasonably far. Now this car has that luxury package, so it has the upgraded rear seats. That means they don't fold, but the space on offer in the boot is still okay. You'll get a couple of big suitcases in there without too much of a stress. We've got netted areas off to the left and right, and here's something that might make you go for a G80 instead of a GV80 SUV if you want one of these new Genesis cars and you live in the country. And that's because the G80, on its biggest wheel and tire package, these 20-inch wheels that look pretty good, does actually get a space saver spare underneath this boot floor. On the GV80, if you get a model with its big wheels, which is most of them in the range, you only get a tire repair kit. So if you are going to be running on a lot of rural roads, that's a point in the G80's favor, in my opinion. Still, nicely styled car, elegant to look at, nice to sit in. What's it like to drive? So the Genesis G80, it's got a striking exterior, the interior is very plush, but what does this large luxury sedan actually drive like? Well, Genesis didn't really want this to be a sports sedan in the style of like a BMW 5 Series or an Audi A6. Those two cars are pretty sporty no matter what grade you go for. You know, most of the 5 Series sedans sold here in Australia are M Sport, and they have an M Sport adaptive suspension which gives you a firm ride pretty much all the time. Not necessarily a bad ride, but a firm one where you feel the road surface, and the control in bends is kind of what the goal was for a car like that. I don't think that was really the goal for the G80. Instead, this car is about real opulence, comfort, plushness, long distance touring ability, and the first thing that came to my mind when I started driving this car on country roads was how familiar it would feel to somebody coming out of a Holden Caprice, for example. There's sort of this really lush character to the way this car gets down the road, where, you know, bumps are absorbed, but it's also not afraid to kind of have a suspension quality which is a little bouncier, and I don't mean that in a way which suggests that it's sickly or not capable of being tied down to the road, because it is, but there is more of that pronounced suspension reverberation in the G80 that you won't find in something like an A6 or a 5 Series, which tend to have that firmer ride quality. You really do feel sharper bumps more in those cars, but they sort of pin the ride straight back down after a bump. That isn't really the effect you get in the G80. But I'll come back to suspension in a moment, because there are actually two different suspension choices for this car, and the way it drives kind of depends on the spec you choose. First of all, as usual, let's talk about engines. There's a choice of two turbocharged petrol engines in this car, and both of them are new. There's a 2.5 litre single turbo 4-cylinder that is very competitive on outputs. 224 kilowatts of power places it at a significantly more powerful point than its main competitors, which would be the BMW 530i, the Mercedes E300, or the Audi A6 45 TFSI. Now, those cars all cost a little bit more, and they all have around 190 kilowatts of power. So here you're getting kind of another 15% more engine, more power and torque for a little less money. And of course, I mean, if you are launching a new luxury brand, that's a strategy which looks attractive. But I think a lot of people are going to be wooed by the up-spec engine, which is 15 grand more. It's a 3.5 litre twin turbo V6, also new, producing 279 kilowatts of power. Now, this engine isn't outright fast, but it gives you that great classic big displacement feel and a good sound. If we listen, it's pretty lusty. So you're not really slammed back into the seat back or anything like that. Torque's only 530 newton meters, so it's not hugely muscular, but it gets the job done in a way which will appeal to buyers of traditional Australian large sedans. So if you've been holding out, waiting for something super comfy, super plush, super laid back like a Caprice used to be, then I think the G80 will really appeal. But because it isn't a sports sedan, because it hasn't pursued that firm ride quality, body control isn't what it is in the German rivals to this car. In comfort mode in particular, it's quite nautical and pretty boaty. So switching the drive mode into sport makes a lot of difference if you have the luxury package, which adds a camera-driven, continuously adaptive damper system to this car, where a camera scans the road for the road surface, imperfections, undulations. It adapts the dampers in advance to give you this really kind of level ride. So comfort is really soft. Sport is still pretty soft. Sport is probably more soft than what comfort would be rated in a 5 Series BMW, for example. But it helps. It does pare the car down. However, if you don't go for the luxury package and instead you have fixed suspension in this car, if you go for the fixed suspension, you actually get quite a good ride, which is kind of the one good setting. And often vehicle engineers talk about there only being one good suspension setup, and adaptive dampers always are two compromises, comfort and sport. And that is the case on the G80. The fixed suspension is actually the best possible setting. Sport on the adaptive suspension is good, but the fixed suspension is better. However, because it's kind of tied in with other attractive specification on the car, you'll probably end up with the adaptive system anyway if you're buying a G80. So comfort is what you would probably leave for your commute, and that's about it. And even then, if you like a tied down ride on your commute, you'll be using Sport. It's also worth noting that the 3.5 litre twin turbo comes with big brakes, so it can haul itself to a stop quicker, which is a good thing, because not only does the engine weigh more, but it's also capable of some fairly significant cross-country speeds, which is always attractive. Refinement, though, is a huge standout for the G80. It's really quiet, there's acoustic glass as standard, and all this harshness has really just been eliminated from this car, and so it's a very relaxing cross-country tourer. However, I think the SUV version of this car, the GV80, is an even better cross-country tourer. Like the G80, the GV80 is also very comfort biased, yet somehow it actually has slightly better body control, and because you're set high, your visibility out, your view out is really good, and there's just a bit more space. I actually think if you're going to go for a comfy luxury car, an SUV like the GV80, more traditionally we would have thought of cars like the Range Rover, tends to make a lot of sense. For me, this form factor, the sedan, needs to differentiate itself by being a bit more engaging in terms of handling if it's going to survive. The G80 is much more that kind of Americana view of a sedan, really soft, really plush, really opulent, and it's absolutely no problem if that's your thing. All power to you, and Genesis have given you an option in this car. But for me, the GV80 probably makes a touch more sense. However, safety features are an absolute standout. So we've got blind spot cameras, which work really well. We've got adaptive cruise control, which is very well tuned, as is the lane keeping system. That's switchable as well. And then we have things like junction AEB, pedestrian, cyclist, and car AEB. You got reversing AEB if you go for the luxury package as well, which I think is a critical safety feature. Front and rear cross traffic alert. So you do feel like you're in something bang up to date in terms of the technology on board. So those are my detailed impressions of the new Genesis G80 large luxury sedan. Nice to have a new entrant into this segment. Even though the sedan market is kind of shifting with people moving into crossovers like the new GV80, there's still a lot to like about these traditional luxury cars that feel like a good fit for long distance country touring here in Australia. Let me know what you think of the G80 down below in the comments. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.